Thanks for joining us. In order to support us to produce Clancy's Kitchen, you can donate as little as €5 or $5 a month and gain access to exclusive content. Just go to www.patreon.com/Clancy's Kitchen. That's www.patreon.com/Clancy's Kitchen. Enjoy the podcast. Fáilte Rash, welcome back to Clancy's Kitchen, and I am delighted to say we have a couple of women, and not just any old women, but powerhouses of women in the kitchen with us today, which is great because we've had a load of men recently. We actually had Joan Clancy was in, right. But we've had more men, so it's great to see some women coming in. So let me introduce my aunt, Bríd Mooney Nielsen.
Hello.
So Bríd is a folk singer, a guitarist.
I didn't go that far now.
You would have, certainly will. An actress, has written a couple of lovely songs as well.
Oh, well.
And you also worked for Gaelin, didn't you?
I did
for a number of years.
Many years ago.
Yeah. Promoting the Irish language.
Yeah, worked with
culture.
Sloga. You know, Sloga, there was a competition where they, every art kind of whatever you'd say, there's poetry, art music, every art form was catered for.
Yeah.
And we ran competitions, local competitions, and then regional competitions, and then we had a big All-Ireland final, and it was fantastic. It was like a rock festival, actually, and I mean that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Or Michael
I remember
Davitt
you bringing down all the characters down to Rinn over the years.
Yes,
I remember
indeed.
you having your own company car. I remember that as a child going, wow, that's what, you know, what growing up has been all about. You get a car and everything.
Absolutely. I used to travel all over Ireland. With the adjudicators. I would take, you know, like Pather Mercier and all the big, you know, fantastic time. Philip King. Had a great time. Time.
Lovely. Well,
Gabriel Rosenstock, all these people, really interesting people, and good fun, great fun.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing all about that. The stories. Yeah. Anne Mulqueen, you're known to us always as Anne Mulqueen. I suppose officially your married name Kelleher or Kelleher. But known to us, the Mooneys would always refer to you as Anne Mulqueen.
Oh, yeah. Well, I suppose before I came to Rinn, people would have known me. You know, I'd been singing a good few years. Yeah. It was through the singing, actually, that I met my late husband, actually, Tomas, with Nicholas Tobin one night, I remember, a St. Patrick's night in Cashel at a concert. So I landed in Rinn anyway.
And Anne, just to say, so you're originally, you're a native of Castleconnell, is that right?
Yeah.
County Limerick, near the River Shannon.
That's right. I was reared by the Shannon, and it took me an awful long time to get used to the sea when I arrived here because the river is so small compared to the sea. And I remember the fishermen couldn't get over that, that I would prefer the river to the sea, you know, because the sea is so vast.
You didn't tell them, did you?
Oh, I did.
So, Anne, you arrived here in 1969, is that right?
69, yeah.
And by then, you won the Fleadh Cheoil a number of years running.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was earlier on now. Cheapest when I think if it's my first Fleadh was 59. Wow. 59, 60 and 61.
Right.
And I remember, the 59 one was in Thurles. And at that stage, there was only junior or senior.
Right. Yeah.
And I had to go into the senior. Yeah. Because there was there was an under 12, I think, whatever it was anyway. Yeah. It was, I had to go into the older one. And I remember three adjudicators in 59. Seamus Innes was one. A fellow by the name of Seamus O'Ryan. His wife would have been a famous fiddle player, Aggie White, the Balnakill Céilí band. They were very popular at the time. Yeah. And Sean O'Sheacon, he was a big GAA man. Yes. They were the three adjudicators. But I remember there was a good lot in for the competition, but nobody had a traditional song on the day. And am I right in saying it was your grandmother that taught you? It was her song I had, and it was a local song called The Falls of Duness, along the river. And I remember I was kind of half embarrassed about singing it, But then when I listened to the others, they had the green grass of home and every kind of thing. But
Guilty as charged.
I always remember Seamus Ennis, when the competition was over, the adjudicators usually would give a little talk,
Yes.
about, this song or that song. But he stood up and, the big imposing figure he had, and he looked out at the audience and all he said was, "Guess who won?" Because I suppose I was the only one with a decent song,
Yeah,
But,
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. That was he was great that time, and there'd be a prize winners concert then at night, and that kind of they don't do it
And of course, you
anymore.
learned Irish as well. Not only were you singing at a very early age, but you learned Irish. You might. We'll come back to that in a moment.
Okay.
We start with you, Bríd, just with looking at, we had Donnacha on here for the last podcast. Yeah. And Donnacha, of course, had grown up in Mooney's pub. And we refer often, don't we, Ryland, to Mooney's during the podcast.
They were
and
great.
How could you not?
How could you not, of course. And, for people now, pubs kind of have a different meaning today, don't they? Totally than what they did years ago.
Yeah.
But as I said on the podcast the last time, I remember the field being full of campers, and of course it was my grandmother Tessie, your mother, Tessie and Dennis that had Mooneys. Yeah. But Bríd, you went back a generation again before Donnacha. So tell us a little bit.
Oh my God!
Give us a little bit of the
But
background.
you're just listening to Anne there now, talking about Seamus Ennis. Oh my God! If I went back to the old pub, I remember sleeping up in the old pub with Carmel. Because
now, when you say the old pub, that was a
thatched pub. Yeah. That was the thatched pub.
And the woman of the house
was Hanny Cody,
who to you
my mother's aunt, my grandaunt, and she was very strict, Hanny, and very somber kind of a character. But she was old, obviously. Now I'm going back to when I was maybe 6 or 7. So Carmel would be 10 years older than me, so she was, say, 16. Maybe I was even 5, maybe she was only 15. But she would have to sleep up there with Hanny when she was old, when Hanny was older. And often I'd go up with her, and I loved it. People would say to me now, were you not frightened as a little child? Because there was no electricity.
Yeah.
And I remember Carmel bringing me upstairs there were 2 little rooms upstairs, one where Hanny slept, and then where Carmel slept. Yeah. And I'd be in the bed. And I'd go up, obviously. She'd put me up early. And I just loved listening to Henny. And she'd be inside. And she'd be praying. And she'd be kind of shawling. Or she'd be... when I think of it now, I was weird, kind of. Because I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the drama of it. Or, and the candle. I remember she'd leave the candle lighting, Carmel, and I'd be watching the show. I still remember that.
And would there be singing in the pub back then, at that time?
Well, I can't remember, to be quite honest with you. I do remember there was an old man who worked down in Harties on the farm. What was his name?
Tucker.
No, not at all. Way before Tucker. And I remember he used to sing a song called Courting Bonnie Lily Lindsay Now. Courting Bonnie Lizzie Lindsay now. Did you ever hear that?
No.
Courting, and in my time I've had a few, but I'm courting Bonnie Lizzie Lindsay now. And I always remember that. Tom Sayers or something was his name.
Because this is the thing that people don't realise again. Singing wasn't kind of done in pubs. And a lot of the time they'd hunt you out the door if you started singing.
It was very much when I arrived now in 69. The singing, all men. Yeah. There was 2 women.
Yeah.
Polly Kelly.
Yeah.
And Mary Bateman or Mary Compton. But every man that came into the pub could sing.
Yeah.
We had a pub, by the way.
This is what I'm just going to say. So just to be
competition.
clear.
Well, the thing is, there was no competition.
Not at all.
Tessie was my best friend.
Yeah. Of course.
When I came to Rinn, I spent more of my time in Mooneys than I did at home.
Yeah.
But there were 3 pubs, you could say, in the village, right? So there was Murray's over in Helvick, Tig on Cheoil. So when you married Tomas, you took over, you then bought Tig on Cheoil and took it over.
That was Draper's before, was it?
That's right, yeah.
And did I read somewhere, I saw it somewhere, that you were one of the very few pubs in Ireland that had a licence for 22 hours because of the proximity to the pier and the fishermen coming in off the boats.
Yeah. You need only...
Lest they
we were
couldn't
the
get a
nearest
drink.
pub to the pier.
Yeah.
And I think there's one or two left in Dublin, they tell me, on the
Keys,
the Keys.
Yeah, I remember that from Dublin, actually. They'd
Do
call
you?
them,
Yeah, the
not that I'd
fishermen in the
frequent them myself, but they used
I
to
did frequent them.
So you know all about
So
it.
I knew them in Dublin, yeah.
But they used to call them early houses.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's
And with
right,
industries and people on shifts and the like, and you'd have it in Wales too. People
Yeah.
working all night,
That's
are
right,
coming
and
out
they could come
like
in.
We're entitled to a drink. Was that the
yeah,
idea?
furnacemen.
Yeah.
You know, they'd want to go in for a pint.
Or people
after work.
travelling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it was popular. Well, we would probably just have the fishermen, you know, that'd be going out very early. Well, they never bothered us very early, but they would very late.
Late at
But
night.
you need only close for 2 hours out of the
Imagine.
24.
Yeah.
Do you know? So, and you
And
could stay open to
being a
22
singer
hours.
yourself then and coming into the Gaeltacht of An Ryan, you had no Irish before you came.
No Irish. I'd had the Irish for a table and a chair and different bits and pieces. But I wouldn't have been able to put a sentence together, or I hadn't a clue what was going on.
Yeah.
And did you learn Irish literally by just listening to people speak?
yeah.
And of course your husband was from West Kerry,
Kerry,
actually,
that's
so he
right,
would have
around
had
Fintry.
Kerry
And
Irish.
Tomas came to Rinn to teach in the college.
The Clonsh,
that was, so I had to make some kind of an effort to put up, speak a bit of Irish. But I remember asking him one thing, and 'tis now I realise that he was right. You see, I was all right in present tense when they'd come in and say, you know, Jis Muragatan, Hawn Log or Hauling, you know, I'd say, oh, haw, like, you know. But if I was to say yesterday was nicer, I couldn't.
It's the
Or
grammar.
tomorrow might be, you know, the future tense, I wasn't able to do it. And I remember saying to Tomas, would you ever write out one sentence in past, present and future? And then I'll kind of have an idea, you know. And he said, no, I'll never do that for you because you will not learn like that. The only way you learn now is listen.
Yes.
And you'll cop on after a while that you have. And, you know, he was right.
Yes.
I'd listen. I said, God, I said that wrong now yesterday. I better, you know, correct it, you know. But I made some awful mistakes.
Yeah.
Oh my
But wasn't
God.
he so right? That's how I learned Welsh, was listening to Ryland,
Yeah,
speaking to the kids in Welsh, you know, and just little things.
it does work,
them on
you
your
know.
ear.
Because if you, as he said to me, if you have any cop on at all, you'll cop on that you said it wrong, you know.
Yeah. But
So
it's
that's
amazing, like certain singers, musicians would go to certain pubs in the parish, obviously proximity to the pubs.
Yeah.
So, Nicholas Tobin would have frequented.
Well, he would be
Cheoil.
good. He'd go to Mooneys.
He'd have gone to Mooneys.
Yeah, but then you said there in 1960 there were no women or 69 rather.
69.
But we in 1969-70 I'd say myself and Cleona.
Cleona Morocco.
Cleona,
You wouldn't have
And
been
if you're-
going into the pubs. Though.
No,
You were
but we
very
used to
young.
we used to play in the small side, and that time
Yeah.
the cadets were coming to Rinn.
That's right. Yeah.
You know,
Who were the
army.
cadets now?
The
Oh, the
army.
army.
The army,
used to set up camp in Rinn, and all the young cadets would come down to the college to learn Irish.
Yeah.
And of course, they were all coming into the pub. So the young ones, women there, you know, my mother was great. She was a great businesswoman. She'd have us playing, music, but we loved it anyway. We
What I
wanted
meant
to
was
be playing.
the old Chanot singers.
I know, yeah.
There was the women never came out. That age group to sing in the pubs.
Well, women wouldn't be in the pubs
No,
necessarily.
not at that time. But those young kids now were
Yeah, we
great. I
grew up,
remember them. What's this year names were? Plumos.
Well, I wasn't there. They had because I went to school in Dungarvan, most, you know, in the Mercy.
Yeah.
But there was a group in I can't remember.
Plumos, was it?
Plumos?
Yeah,
I don't know now, to be quite honest.
Anya,
yeah. And Siobhan Drummy, I think,
Drummy,
and Bríd Kelly, and
they were lovely.
and there were quite a few different.
So
over the years.
So there was a real range, because I suppose, just to explain to me, because some of our viewers and listeners are in America and across the world.
Yeah.
The range of different types of singing. So you had Chanot singing, which explain to people what we mean by Chanot singing for those who don't really know.
Well, Seanos is primarily from the Gaeltachts, I suppose.
She's in Irish, always in Irish.
Always
With her
in
traditional
Unaccompanied.
singing
Unaccompanied
in
traditional
English,
Irish singing.
Yeah, and Seanos means
Funny now.
old style, doesn't
Yeah.
it? The old
Listening
style.
Old tradition, Seanos.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was listening to radio on a Gaeltacht yesterday now, and the Grealishes, of course, the three sisters, they're outstanding. You know, they're the real thing.
Yes.
And my son, Ogie, was with me, you see, and Nora Grealish was singing. And I said to Ogie, would you know now who that is, you know? And he listened. Well, they're from Connemara anyway, he said, you know. Yeah. Well, I said, you're now listening to the earth. That's coming straight from the earth, the way she's singing. You'll never hear that again when she's gone, you know. Yeah. Just so
it's like the Queen Taconing, you know, years ago. The women would...
Tis very...
A Queen...
It's like a chant almost. Or,
absolutely,
It's very, very primitive, you know. And the way life is going now, you see, they're not, you know, they're not going back.
Mind you, Anne, in saying that there are quite a few really good Seanos singers, young Seanos. You know, we have them here in Rinn.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. There's the
McGraths,
the McGraths, Kieran Galvin.
And the Oireachtas does a great job. You know, they go in
and
for
in
the
Connemara there are several as well.
Yeah.
But I suppose the style
but the
does
old
change.
thing is gone, you know. Even the Irish words.
Yes.
I've noticed a big difference since I came here. It's, you know, I'm here over 50 years now. There's an awful lot of the words gone.
Yeah.
That were used when I came here now. For instance, feach, you know, feach amach. Hiach, they used to say when I came. Starting with a hiach. But that's gone. I don't hear anyone saying that now.
Yeah.
There was a few more now that we were talking about the other day that seems to be law. Peg Reagan now, if Peg Reagan, you know, she was living nearly there, if she was saying Hon Law go Holling, she'd say Hon Wall.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know?
Right.
That's gone.
Yeah, that's
but it's happening, I believe, in all Gaeltachts, you know.
Yeah.
But music is changing anyway.
Yeah.
It is, but go back first before we talk about music and give us an idea. I mean, you lived, both of you, you know, the heyday of... you know, the people who came to this area, my God, I mean, Mooneys was known as one of the greatest.
When you were talking about Seamus Ennis, I remember
the greatest music pubs, but not only musicians, writers, artists, for God's sake, Mulqueen in recent times, but you know, give us a picture a little of how it was.
I could tell you
70s, 80s.
When I was older, obviously, you know, I grew up in the pub and had the crack. The crack was great, and people used to camp. We used to have Anne's husband started Éanach na Ringa.
Oh, that's right.
And this was like a festival, which, my God, was fantastic. It was a marquee.
That's right.
And he'd bring in different musicians, and you know, it was just great.
And the musicians would come from all over
the place.
All Irish singers, all Australian.
No, folk, everything kind of. Anything went, didn't. But so many campers would come, and Daddy used to allow them to camp in the field beside the pub. Yeah. But man, dear, if they got rowdy or anything, I remember him coming out, and people. Would you believe that I met people, like not that awfully long ago, in Kilkenny. And when they found out I was from Rinn and I was a Mooney, they said, "Oh my God, I remember your father coming out with a shotgun at 3:00 in the morning." And we were all terrified. But that was Daddy, you know. Yeah. And he came out and he'd shoot into the air. My dear, there'd be silence for the rest of the night, you know.
And people came from all over. There were Italians and Dutch and Germans and everything. From
and Daddy, he was a fright as well for picking up hitchhikers, Daddy. And I remember one time he picked up this French guy.
With different nationalities. You know, he was fascinated with people from different parts of the world that we didn't always come in contact with.
And Mammy would go mad, you know. He'd bring them back to the house to stay in the house. And Mammy was like,
it was a great house for that.
Proverbial Egypt. But he was great, really. Daddy,
he was. Sure, Mooneys, everyone knew Mooneys, even today.
Yeah.
when you mention Ring, they always mention Mooneys, you know.
And you had, I remember even as a child, the Dubliners and the Furies. And,
everyone came to Mooneys,
you know, the session. I think on the small side was always, am I right in saying this was kind of the trad session? And then the big side was the folk
Well, the big
singing,
side at the time wasn't as big as it is now.
That's right.
Because Anne and Tom extended it.
Yeah.
But the small side was always the sessions, you know, like, I mean, really, it was. I remember working in the pub and is this Clancy's pub?
Oh,
You know, because people actually thought it belonged to the Clancys because Moira married a Clancy, I suppose, you know, and this and that. But Liam and Bobby would always go to the small. We'd always go to the small side for sessions, you know. But I remember, obviously, because of Liam, Seamus Ennis was here all the time. Practically lived here. I think he came one time, and he stayed for months. So he'd be in the pub all the time. And Brian Bulger, I don't know if you remember Brian Bulger, who was with the Emmett Spicelands.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Brian was a good friend of Michael Casey's. Do you know the Caseys? Michael's mother was Dr. Anne Casey, and they had a house in Ring. So he and Michael would come and stay in the house. So Brian would be around again for months.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember a night in the kitchen. Now, Mammy was gone to bed and she would often lock the pub so that we couldn't
go in and steal the booze.
Yeah, well, we drank Buckfast Abbey wine, I remember one night, bottles of it, because we couldn't get anything else. You know, Mammy had this as a tonic.
Right.
This was her tonic that the poor woman never drank. And she'd take a glass of this Buckfast Abbey, I think it was.
And what would Buckfast Abbey do for
kind of
you? Give you energy, was it?
Yeah, it was like a tonic, wasn't it?
Okay.
Sure, I think we finished off 6 bottles of it one night, a whole gang of us, you know, correctness. But I'll always remember Seamus Ennis and Brian Bulger and whoever else was Daddy wasn't there. Anne and myself, maybe Tom and a few of us. And they were arguing and we were talking about Cuba.
Okay.
And Brian Bulger.
So this would have been what year now?
Oh my God.
Was this the Cuban
maybe
missile
70,
crisis?
maybe it would have been 73, 74 maybe. And Brian Bulger insisted on calling Cuba to prove a point. And ringing and
who did he call?
Jimmy Welch at the time was in the post office. Poor Jimmy was out of bed at 2:00 in the morning. Put me through to Cuba. I want to speak Fidel Castro in Cuba. This is true. I mean, correctness, really. Correctness. But I remember that so well.
That's
madness.
Listen, before we go on, all this talk about music, give us a song.
Oh, God.
Go on. Anything at all that you fancy.
What?
Yeah, go on. We might have one from Bríd. Sure.
Oh, my God.
Myself and Anne will join in if we know it.
Yeah, right.
And Ryland. What are you going to give us?
This, I'm just thinking, Bobby and Peg. I grew up obviously with their records in the house, and Peg used to sing this. I know where I'm going.
Oh, yes.
I know where I'm going, and I know who's going with me. I know who I love, but the dear knows who I'll marry. I have stockings of silk and shoes of fine green leather, combs to buckle my hair, and a ring for every finger. Feathered beds are alive, and painted rooms are bonny. But I would give them all for my handsome, winsome Johnny. I know where I'm going, and I know who's going with me. I know who I love, but the dear knows who I'll marry.
Ah, yes. That was lovely. Yeah. Well, You mentioned the Clancys there, and the Clancys coming to Ring, and you were saying, Brie, that was a song by Bobby and Peg years back.
Yeah.
And of course, well, the lads were making a name for themselves in the States. Bobby and Peg were a big scene in Ireland in the early days, I think.
I'd say Bobby never really wanted to leave Ireland, so he didn't. He wasn't that...
Well, he'd been over with the brothers when they went initially, and then he came back to take over from the insurance business in Carrick-on-Shore. And he said Liam was very shy, of course. Liam at the time was thinking about joining the priesthood. And he sent Liam over and said, look, this will be good for you now. Go on over. And I remember him saying often, I remember him going off on the boat. Of course, it was the boat in those days from Cove. And he said, I remember him going with the big coat on him. The coat was Daddy had given him his coat. And it was too big. It was out here somewhere. You know, and of course, you know, Liam's stories are legendary about going to arriving in New York looking like another planet. Yeah. And when they came back to Ireland then. But you remember them coming back into to Mooneys at that time in the 60s, would it have been?
Well,
Well,
I remember, and I must look it up now on YouTube, The Life of Riley was a television programme.
Yeah, I don't remember that one.
Yeah. I was very young. But we had a television at home in the old house. Now, the old house was before we moved into the pub.
Yeah.
There was a little shop. My mother ran a shop down near the college.
That's right.
And we called that the old house now. Yeah. And down in the old house, we had a telly. And again, I was very young because I must have been only 6 or 7 or maybe 8. And the house was full because the Clancys were on The Life of Riley. But this must have been before they came to Ring. Yeah. Because I didn't know, you know what I mean? I was watching it, but I wasn't familiar with them, you know. I know that much. Yeah. So it must have been it could have been that year that they came to Ring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whenever. Because what year did they come?
I think, well, there's a few different stories.
63, I think.
Was it Donna says Liam came with, was it one of the Dubliners?
Yeah, well, I'd have been 7 in 63.
Yeah.
Kieran Burke.
Kieran Burke, was it?
Yeah, they told that story.
He came. And then Bobby and Liam for a while, they'd collect songs and they went all around the country with Diane Hamilton at the time, collecting songs, old Irish, from the people, as you say, and that... as it came up from the earth, and of course, very few people back then had any kind of recording equipment, and you know they went around collecting all these songs went into pubs all over the country, and so I mean, Daddy loved going to all these far-flung places, and I think he
actually on one of your podcasts, who said that it was Tomás Kelleher.
Oh yeah,
Tomás brought them down to the college to sleep down in the college. When they came,
they came first. I think they were on a tour. I remember Dolly McMahon was Kieran's Dolly was with them. She was a guest.
She was married to Kieran,
and they had a concert in Carrick-on-Shore, and they had a row.
Oh, they lost Barney or something.
And the whole thing broke up.
Yeah.
That's right.
But what was...
I think they got drunk today.
I don't know.
I'd say they might have.
I think...
The tour stopped anyway, but what was left came to Ring. That was it. And Cluna, Seamus Clune, James McGrath and Moss. And there was some kind of accommodation in the college anyway, and that's where they brought it back. The Mooneys, of course, was their spot, you know. They had a great kind of a
James
gathering.
McGrath would have known probably Kieran McMahona as well, would he?
He mightn't have known Kieran at the time. No, I'd say no. Kieran was the Job of Journey Work was his programme, but he would it was more or less, I'd say, the Clare, Galway that he would have visited, you know. But he knew the Clancys because he fixed up a tour for them.
Yeah. Tell the story.
In about 63, I remember. Now, we wouldn't have known the Clancys in America at the time, but Kieran brought them on a big tour around, you know. Sure, God, the whole place went wild altogether, you know.
Yeah.
But I was telling Bríd about a story that happened, I remember. Again, now I was very young, and I had heard, I knew your father, Bobby, of course, and Peg and all, and I had heard of the Clancys, but they weren't kind of, they weren't doing concerts here or anything. Yeah. So Ciarán Mac Mahona then was a neighbour of mine, you see, from Limerick.
Back in Limerick, yeah.
And I would have known him, like, through the flats and that. So anyway, I had a friend who lived at the other side of Limerick, Newcastle West, and she came to my house for me to hitch. Everything was hitching that time. Out to her house, you see, for the weekend. So we went out. I lived on the Dublin Road that time, near the village. And we were outside hitching away anyway. And who did we hitch? Only Ciarán Mac Mahona. He would have known me, you see, and I knew him. So anyway, we got into the car, and I remember Liam and Tom were in the back. It was a Volkswagen car.
Tom Clancy with Liam.
Clancy and Liam. Now, we didn't know them at all. I wouldn't have known them. I knew Bobby, all right.
Yeah.
So Ciarán introduced us and all anyway, and of course, Ciarán put me singing for them, you see. Now, they were going to Cork to the Arcadia. I remember the Arcadia Ballroom. Okay. The Clancy Brothers, they were putting on a show there, you see. So we were delighted. We set into our car, went off anyway, and there was a kind of a place outside Limerick City. You went one way for Cork and the other way where this girl, Frances was her name, was living. So anyway, Ciarán said, you know what you'll do? Come with us. And we said we would.
They were the days, the spontaneity of it.
Off we went.
And you were only young ones.
Oh, I was about, I'd say, 15. Frances would have been 2 or 3 years older than me, maybe 2. We headed off anyway, and didn't know what was going to happen. As Frances had no money and I had a £0.50, I remember.
And what could you get for a £0.50 back then?
Oh, very little, I'd say, at the time. So we arrived anyway when they were swamped all together, the Clancys, when they arrived at the hall and the whole lot. And they brought us a big dinner, a big meal. We never saw anything like that, Didn't know what was happening to us for the night, but we went to the show with them anyway, and it was great. Everybody was just milling around them. So, of course, there was a hotel, I don't know, was it the Victoria Hotel that time was beside it. They were all staying there anyway. But there was no bed. We were up all night singing, And the next thing anyway, Ciarán Mac Mahona, being the gentleman Ciarán was, and he knew all belonged to me, my parents and all. And he said, look, I'm after ringing CIE and there's a bus leaving for Limerick in 15 minutes, so I'd take you up to the bus because they were going on to another gig, you see. Yeah. So, we said, Tom, I remember, came to the bus with us. And Ciarán drove us to the bus. And here we were getting into the bus with no money. You see. And fair play to Ciarán, he said, do you have your fare? I said, we haven't. And fair play to him. I remember he gave me £2.
Which was £40.
Yeah.
So into the bus with the two of us, and they all waved us off, and they were, we were wicked lonely leaving them and all. So anyway, when we were in the bus, Frances said to me, well, 'tis a terror to be spending £2.
On a bus fare?
On the bus, she said to me, we'll get out again and we'll hitch it.
Yeah. Back to where you were?
To Limerick,
Okay.
We went out onto the Limerick Road, and we that time the bus to stop anywhere. Yes. We stopped and we got out of the bus and we had our £2. Yeah. And I remember the Dixielanders were playing in the village in Castleconnell that night. Yes. And we were thinking of our money for the dance.
Oh, very good.
We got out anyway, we were thumbing away, and who did we thumb?
Only the lads again.
Only Ciarán and the lads again.
And Tom.
Oh, the shame of it after they put us into the bus. But they let on, they didn't see us and we let on, we didn't see them.
So they didn't stop for you?
No, not at all. It was very embarrassing. After Ciarán paying our bus fare and everything.
That's a great story.
That was great. Yeah. But then when, I kind of... Funny now, I remember... a curate at home in Castleconnell at the time, he had a great admiration for this part of the country. Now, I hadn't a clue where Dungarvan was or anything like that. And he was mad into dogs, greyhounds. Right, and he was always talking about his Master McGrath, you see. So my father, my mother, and myself and my sister, he took the four of us one Sunday to see Master McGrath. This, you know, the
monument. There's a song
monument.
about it.
Yeah.
Monument. I think Donald sang a song recently. Liam
That's
used to sing
right,
it for Master McGrath. Yeah.
Anyway, he then brought us to Tramore, and we stopped for petrol at a place called, and it was a pub as well, called Rockets.
Oh yeah, Rockets.
And I heard this lovely singing coming out of Rockets. And I said to my mother, that's Bobby Clancy and Peg, you know. Oh God, she said, we'll go in and we'll have a look at them, you see. So we went in and Bobby and Peg were there, but Liam was with them.
Right. Oh. Yeah.
And I think it was Tom as well. But they were just home on a holiday. They would have been singing in America now, but we didn't know about them here.
Yeah.
So, of course, we had another great evening singing with them, you know. But then when I came to Rinn in 69, they all had houses in Rinn, and, you know, God, they adored them. You know, Tom now in particular was living just up from the pub, from our pub, we'll say, Clickenkill.
Yes.
And he was in and out every day.
But I remember that, Captain Kylie's, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah, I remember
there
staying there as a child. Yeah.
But what I did notice from being in the pub now myself, you know, we'll say the 3 Tobins, the 4 Tobins, you know, Michael Tobin, and who wasn't related to, and the coxswain, as we used to call him, they all, John Paul, they were all used to sing, but would be shanos, you know, and accompanied. Yeah. So they got a bit embarrassed, you see. They didn't like to be singing when the Clancys came on the scene. They had guitars and everything, and they were kind of saying to themselves, you know, we should be singing something like that. So the first song they picked up was I'll Tell My Ma from the Clancys, you see. But they would only be listening, you know. They'd be picking up the words as they'd hear them.
Yes.
So they were going great with I'll Tell My Ma anyway. And the line, you know, they pulled my hair and they broke my comb, but that's all right till I go home. The line they had there was, they pulled my hair and they broke my pole.
Oh, yeah.
That's all right till I go home. They had outstanding lines that they would have picked up, you know, just from listening to them, you know.
Yeah.
But I have to say now that Liam Clancy was very good to Nicholas Tobin and myself. We'd be about the 2 singers that moved out.
And Nicholas Tobin was quite, I mean, he was well known all over Ireland and beyond for being a Cheoil singer at that point. But he was also a fisherman, and he would just go about his business, but he just loved to sing and was a renowned singer.
He never took any notice. He took no notice of fame. He never even knew where he was, you know.
There's a funny story. You might remember this. I think Liam was at the BBC or something down at one point, and he wanted to interview Nicholas Tobin. I can't know. Finbar tells the story better. And of course, he was a great storyteller as well.
Oh, yeah.
A bit of a Shanachie, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Really?
Nicholas.
Was he
he wasn't.
Nicholas was very quiet.
No,
do you know what it was? It was the way he'd use words.
The way
he'd use words. He said something like, men of great sporting agriculture.
Yes.
And, you know, it didn't really fit together necessarily. That's what it was.
But he was very
quiet.
And
Liam was trying to get him round, and he wasn't, I think he was intimidated with the
Liam
cameras
would be the
BBC.
storyteller.
And Liam was trying to feed him all this and tell us about, and you go out fishing and the lobster pots and... And yes, and we'd have bits of mirrors in the lobster pot. And why Liam said to him, would you have mirrors in the lobster pots? And he said, oh, I suppose so the lobsters could be admiring themselves.
That'd be typical.
Typical Nicholas.
That was such a great story.
And he loved using big words.
He did.
They would have no relevance to what he was talking about.
I remember talking about the Conneries up in. There was a house. Jerry Murphy and John Doyle were 2 engineers in the council in Dungarvan, and Jerry would have been Bernie Murphy.
Yeah.
But she was still living in Cork, so he was renting with John Doyle this lovely old cottage, Troyes, up in Helvig. And there'd be a session every night of the week, you know, great sessions there. And I remember one night Nicholas was up there and Bobby was there. And Bobby was asking him about the Conneries. Yeah. He had sung the Conneries, and well, they were being deported and transported and I mean, it was just, he was great, wasn't he?
Oh, yes.
He'd come out with these, pick up words from anywhere.
And put them together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't kind of fit in at all.
No, not necessarily.
I remember I was up in Dublin one night and he was there as well. Now, he was recording one of the CDs, and I came into the Cultolan very late at night, and of course I heard this lovely singing coming from the bar. It was Nick himself. So I went down anyway, and there was maybe about 12 people. Seamus McMahon would have been there. Now, they all adored him sitting around, And I had the misfortune of saying to him, when things were quiet, well, Nicholas, how did you get on today? I knew he was recording, and he settled to himself, and I knew I was going to get a kind of a queer answer, and he said, well, everything went all right. He said, only, he said, the man that was recording, I have to say, he said, he was a highly contagious man. You could come out with things like that,
He was such a gentleman. Yeah. When he was recording that time in Gaelin, I'd be home for the weekend, so a few times I brought him back to Dublin with me to record in Gaelin. And he was so gentle and quiet, wasn't he? He was just lovely, the Claus.
He just loved singing.
He was but his voice was, wasn't it?
Oh,
really?
yeah, very.
I remember
very
you telling me
distinct,
stories, Anne, about you and your mother listening to him when you were very young.
Yeah.
Can we just pause there and have a song? I think it would be lovely, Anne, for you to give us a song there. And then we'll back to talk about it.
Well, actually, talking about Tiggin Cheoil.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When we had it for about, I'd say, 8 years, and I had 3 children under 5, so you can imagine. And
on 22 hours a day license.
But we sold it anyway, and I thought that I was in another world. I said, I couldn't believe that I'd be at home with my children and that I'd,
all this time.
So I remember we went down to Kerry, where Tomas comes from, Ventry, and we took a house there for a month. Well, I nearly died. I was so lonely after the characters. Yeah. Do you know, I said, what am I going to do? How am I going to spend my life?
Adapt.
I couldn't go into the pub for a long time after, I'd get very overcome. Yeah. But I sat down and I put a song together.
Oh, this is lovely.
And maybe I'd sing it, just to remind him.
Lovely.
Oh, slán to you, dear Tiggin Cheoil, where once the music rang, with fiddles, flutes, and bowrons, and some lovely songs were sang. But now as though we leave you, although our hearts are sore, we will think of you for many a day as we stroll down by your door. Oh, well do I remember when first I came to you, from the far green fields of Limerick to Ballinall so true, where first I saw a trawler coming in from out of sea, and heard the dreaks of the native tongue, then I knew 'twas the spot for me. On Tuesdays we'd have those Helvig boys, Paddy, Tobin and Davine, Dick Shannon and the China doll, their likes you ne'er have seen. With all things ready, nice and snug, Davin would start the show. With Bull of Oak or Danny Boy, and always Róisín do. From old parish came the comedian, and oh, his eye was keen. But the man who stole my heart away was famed Nicholas Tobin. He sang with great sincerity, and in his native tongue did shine, which leave na man or ochel or unfootish so fine. We had a few more with those Helvet boys, Michael, Tobin and Johnine. The coxswain and the hardy boy, with his shirt so neat and clean. Those were the days, and now they're gone, but I'll join them again once more. Outside the counter in Cheoil, and we'll talk on days of yore.
Oh, lovely. Beautiful.
Isn't it beautiful?
Fabulous.
And you know a very strange thing about the song? When my youngest girl, Nessa, was doing the leaving, I don't know what year it was now, must be well over 20, 30 years ago. You know, the exam paper in Irish. The song came up and 4 questions on it.
Go away.
Where do they live now? What was the name of the pub? And Darach, my nephew, was doing they entered the same year. And Nessa said the minute they all turned the page, you could hear the giggling all around, the classroom, you know.
That's amazing.
And the question, where does Anne live now? Somebody said Nessa wrote, at home with me. I don't know how that happened.
You're making me so nostalgic listening to the period. It's bringing me back to my teenage years.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. We've just completed a short film from the Clancy Brothers homestead in Carrick-on-Shore. This is available for those who are subscribers on Patreon, which you can avail of for as little as $5 or €5 a month. So if you'd like to view this short film, support us at www.patreon.com/Clancy's Kitchen. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. We're having a lovely time in Clancy's Kitchen here, nostalgic, talking about the good old days and the sessions. And before I forget, just to say that we're doing Clancy's Kitchen concert during the Waterford Festival of Food, and that goes on in the Town Hall in Dungarvan on Saturday, the 26th of April at 8 p.m. So get your tickets soon, because they tend to sell out quickly, anything to do with events around the food festival in Dungarvan, because it's such a great event. So we hope to see some of you there. But
you can, just to come in there, you can get your tickets on
www.
Do
you want to just put it on the screen?
WaterfordFestivalofFood.com.
Lovely. Jesus, you're bringing me back there to the good old days. The spontaneity of it, I think, the freedom. Talking about hitching, or talking about, well, we just came across a session, we were planning, or we heard someone singing, and we went in and we sat down. There was such spontaneity.
It doesn't happen. I'm sure it doesn't.
I don't know if it happens.
Anne has a story. I'm just thinking, this came into my head now. Yeah. You remember, you told this story, because I went down to when the girls were young, parent worked away a lot in Saudi and that. Yeah. And when I cook spaghetti bolognese, I love to have a glass of red wine. I have to have red wine with spaghetti bolognese. I think that was, Myra was a great spaghetti bolognese. She made a gorgeous spaghetti bolognese and Bobby loved it. And you'd have to have red wine.
That's a big one in our family.
Yeah. So I had no red wine and I had an au pair at the time, Heidi. Do you remember Heidi?
Danish
girl. She's lovely, Heidi. She's lovely. She's still a great friend of ours, comes over all the time. But I said to Heidi, I'm going to go down. I'll go down to Mooneys because I'll get a glass of red wine. I'd bring up a little glass, a bottle of red wine.
As if.
Yeah, as if. So I went down to Mooneys. This is true, Scott. Went down to Mooneys. How did I meet you? Were you in Mooneys?
I'll tell you. I was in town. I used to have a programme that time for WLR, and I used to record it on a Tuesday from 11 to 12. And on my way out, I remember there was a crowd around called the Modena City Ramblers, would you believe it? They were Italian, but they were copping the Dublin City Ramblers anyway.
The Modena City Ramblers.
Out I came to Mooney's, and Liam Clancy was there. And it was the middle of the day, And
well, it wasn't. It was about 4 or 5 in the evening.
Middle in that.
But anyway,
respectable
Liam
enough.
was like that, It was kind of a bad day, and he put on this kind of a dream, Oh, it is a terrible bad day. Why not have a few songs?
What else would you be doing?
So there was only myself in the beginning. Yeah. So we sat down anyway, and the next thing Bríd arrived for her
my small glass of wine.
Our small bottle of red wine. So Liam insisted that Bríd would sit down. Forget about the dinner. Sit down and have a song,
I can hear it.
So Bríd sat down. And she had this.
I invited you up for spaghetti, I think. And you'll come back up with me.
You had the little bottle in her pocket, and she said, "Now you have to come back up with me for." I even though I say so myself, I make a lovely spaghetti bolognese.
I bet you never
You've got to eat this. So an hour after, Bríd was still there.
Only an hour.
And she had this, she was after replacing the bottle at least 4 or 5 times. Well, she was cockeyed altogether.
Donncha Goff had to carry me.
Donncha just lifted her up like a rag doll and lifted her out, and that was the end of my spaghetti bolognese.
I bet there was some session though.
Oh, it was great with great songs.
Oh, you were such great pals. I mean,
I remember another instance with Liam. Now it was very embarrassing. There was a new hotel in Fermoy, and the fellow that bought it was a piano accordion player. I actually knew him from Kerry when he was very young. He was a Kerry from Killarney, I think. And Liam met him in New York. He had a restaurant in New York as well, this fellow, you see. And he was opening the one in Fermoy. So Liam told him he'd come down for the night.
Grand
and we'd have a great night. So there was 3 cars left to ring anyway for Fermoy. And I had to travel with Liam Clancy for the one reason. I didn't drink, you see. And I was to drive Liam home.
You were the chauffeur.
And Buddy now, and there was another car. There was a whole load of us. Off we went anyway. And we had a great night. And everyone was singing and beautiful food and the whole lot. Now, Liam had a car at the time. And I don't know, I think it was a Zephyr. I know, what I got him, Seamus Innes had one. The front seat was all one anyway,
Yes.
And Liam drank all roads below. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, we decided we'd go home, you see. So they were all gone anyway. Myself and Liam went out to the car. And no way under the sun. My 2 legs wouldn't fit.
Reach the pedals.
And I couldn't move the big seat, And here I was, and I stood when he cursed all. He said, I heard of many a thing, but a fickin' woman's legs too short
to drive a car.
So he had to drive it himself.
Oh my God.
And we were coming home, I'll never forget, near Richmond House, the one there. I actually vomited on top of him.
And you weren't even drinking.
And I wasn't even. And he hunted me out of the car and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, it was the worst night. I don't know how we got home. But imagine my two legs. Sure, I'm only 4'11".
Yeah.
You know? And they wouldn't.
They didn't make cars for women back then.
Especially to drive him home because he wanted to have a good night's drink.
He was the best man.
And you know, we're talking about, you know, the Clancys now and the Tobin and all these great men in the parish. But all the great women of the parish.
Oh,
in
yes,
fact, I remember the last night I saw the two of you together was Nulla Gnaman.
Oh, yeah.
And there was
below,
was it this past year, the year before?
The
year before, I think.
Yeah.
And
we were there this year again, weren't we?
I'm sure you were.
Yeah.
We were,
But I remember sitting back and just listening to, you know, verses of songs that you'd composed yourselves and the stories coming out and I thought, God, it's really kind of
women, all right.
but sure, even years ago there were even better women years ago. When you think of Biddy McGrath, Tess Drummy,
that's right.
Agnes
funny.
Nagel, Agnes Keneally, Noreen Power, Regan.
Nancy,
you know what I mean?
Oh, they were great.
Strong women and
great fun.
I remember
great life to them.
In the 70s. Well, I remember Róisín as a little girl coming. I had a dancing class.
Yeah.
Below in the pub for it was 63, I remember, imagine.
Yes.
Kids, there was nothing for the kids to do, you know.
Yeah, and as I said to you, that memory came back to me as you were talking there. Going down, I thought, did you do Irish dancing in Tegan, as well as everything else? There was Irish dancing.
As a pub and 3 children, I was 4 children that time. Yeah. But then I started an adult class.
Yes.
And that was very successful altogether because they all had done dancing as young ones, you know. And I remember we went to the Oireachtas in Cork for the it wasn't
Manonatula, wasn't it? The Irish countrywomen, no?
No, it was, you know, our own group ourselves. But I remember one night we went into Mooneys anyway, Tess Drummy and Biddy McGrath and myself. And that time I'd take an odd drink now, but I never kind of went into it in a big way, but I saw too much of it in the pub. But anyway, they were drinking away all night, Tess and Biddy and all. So anyway, there was a fella working there at the time. He'd throw you out and you couldn't get back in again no matter what happened. So we were put out and I was driving the same night and Tess and Biddy.
So this is the early hours, was it?
Early hours, about 4 o'clock in the morning. And we were just out and the door now locked when Biddy discovered she left her coat behind her. And she got into a terrible stage. She said, I have to get my coat now. I left it inside, you know. And Tess Drummy looked at her and she said, Biddy, is it that biscuit-coloured coat you're talking about? Oh, it is. Well, if it is, she said, leave it where it is. She left all night.
But they weren't young women at that point.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I was an awful lot younger than them. I don't know how I kind of mixed in. You know, there was a good 20 years between us. Sure, Tess Drummy or Tess Mooney.
Yes.
Tessie and me were great friends.
Yes.
She'd come over to me and we were two publicans. And I remember Shemishin Knick. Used to be trying to make Tessie jealous, you know. And Mrs. Murray, they were very old, but I was very young when I came in, you see. Yeah. And they couldn't get the name around Mulqueen at all, you see, because that was a kind of an unusual name.
Exactly.
And Shemishin went over to Tessie and went, buys Tessie, but I got the lovely pint from Queen Anne last night.
Shamashin now was Shamashin used to work in the old thatched pub for my granddad, for Henny Cody, and he ran he brought in bottles and he cleaned, and they pigs down in the sham, we used to call it. And he did everything. I remember when I was very young, they used to cook a pig's head. And they would cook it down.
Pig's trotters,
half a pig's head. Half a pig's head, and it would be down in the sham that would be done. Now, you don't remember that even, Róisín, do you?
No.
That was, you know where the bend is down from the pub now?
Yes.
Well, there were sheds down there and houses belonging to, because that land was
pigs' heads in them.
And all that kind of work would be done there.
Right.
And there was a fire down there. And I remember, you know, the fire machine, as we used to call it, blowing, the bellows thing. And Shamashin said to me, I must have been only about 5 or whatever. Blow that now, girlie. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, or whatever you'd say.
Yeah.
And I burned the arse out of the pot. The whole thing fell in.
You kept
Well,
it going
that
too
was the
well.
murder up with Henny. And of course, Seamushin, just Miss Cody the young one. Just Miss Cody, I couldn't stop it.
He blamed it on you.
He blamed it
And
on
of course, the pub came down again through women again.
right,
Six
yeah.
generations of women.
Yeah, well,
thereabouts.
however many.
Down through the years.
original.
Was
Yeah,
it?
5 or
They say,
whatever.
Yeah.
Imagine that, all
Yeah,
women.
all women.
And
yeah.
we have to mention, of
Vanity.
course, Anne Mooney.
And
Because
God,
Anne
she
got the
was
pub
something
after
else.
Tessie, your mother Tessie.
Rinn was such a character.
Oh,
because
they all
Mammy never
remember
drank her.
Tell
Mammy
us a
was
story.
very.
Give us a story about Anne, and we have a song then.
Oh my God.
And
So many
we've so
stories.
many stories about her.
Where do you start or
Where
finish?
do you start or finish? Is
She
right.
was so funny, wasn't she?
hilarious.
You know.
She was the last
I
woman
remember
standing
one.
every time, wasn't she?
She was a real hippie, actually. Anne was a born bohemian. She really
wouldn't
was.
go anywhere. Yeah,
And-
and they'd
but,
settle anywhere,
But she just was.
But I remember
Alone
going
to
to
herself.
the Merry Men's School with her one night
Yeah.
in Kilkenny. And that time you could drink and drive and everything. She was driving. But anyway, she was coming home at all hours in the morning. And she was nice and drunk. So she started to get sick and she rolled down the front window. She just put her head out to get sick. But if she did, she vomited up her teeth with it.
She lost her teeth. She had false teeth.
She lost her falls. We never missed. So anyway, when I remember saying to her, then the birds were singing. It was, getting. God, I said, isn't it lovely to hear the birds singing? Well, she said, I didn't give a time. I never heard the birds singing. Now she said to me, do you know what? I'm after discovering her teeth. You see.
Yeah.
Now the next morning, Sean Bowen Branagh used to have a programme on radio and
That's right, yeah.
and I was talking to him or something and I told him about the teeth and didn't he announce it on the radio
Anyone found
that
his
if
teeth?
anyone found a set of false
A
teeth
pool of vomit on the side of the road.
between Waterford and Dungarvan, would they please hand them into Mooneys? Now they made a big laugh that 4 or 5 sets of teeth arrived to Mooneys pub, but I don't know, did she ever I think she'd get a news.
Isn't that brilliant?
She was so funny, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was.
Oh, the all-night sessions. I mean, I remember yourself and Hilda being in the bed in the morning and sending us out, go out and get me a bottle of Lucasade. And Tessie would run us, what are you doing? Get out of here. And we'd say, no, it's for Bríd and Hilda.
Oh, God.
With the
They were very good. It was great.
There were wild times.
Can I just say here, I'm sat here and it's fantastic listening to you. And it came to my head there now, I was thinking, what's that programme on television? And I thought, Loose Women has nothing on you. The stories coming out of the three of you, is just phenomenal.
Some of them we couldn't even tell.
I know, they'd have to be rated. They're X-rated. Well, we have a song. I'm thinking, something... I don't know, I'm thinking about one that's familiar over the years that would be sang in Mooneys and taking Cheoil and anything at all. Whatever you want, we'll join in.
Join in with you.
Grab the guitar there, Bríd.
I wouldn't have anything that
Oh Jesus! Oh God! One over the years.
Whatever you fancy.
Oh yeah, we could do more.
Something else as well, please. For the women of Rinn. Lads, we can keep going, I'd say, for the rest of the day, well into the night. You'll have to come back, is all, because there's so many more stories to be told and songs to be sung.
It was great.
So,
lovely.
Mila,
lovely. And best of luck and break a leg at the concert.
Oh, have a good night. We'll all be there.
You better be. Yeah, come up and sing one with us at the end. All right, so that's it for Clancy's Kitchen today. Thank you for being with us. Gur Mila Mahagwev, Slán go fóil.
Slán in ish. Slán.